All right. Well, good morning. Welcome to another 126 Collective. I'm coming to you today from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which if you've ever been or never been, wow, it's gorgeous. And we have been since our last session, I've been to I think I was in Glacier National Park the last time we shot this session. And since then, we went to the other side of Yellowstone. And then we came down to Grand Teton National Park. So if you've never been, wow. I'm originally from New Orleans, which is super flat. And I spent most of my life 9 feet below sea level. And then for the last 4 years, I've lived in Daytona, and 10 years prior to that in St. Augustine, Florida. So I've lived at sea level. And I definitely believe that my lungs and my body are meant to live at or below sea level, apparently, because the altitude up here is pretty intense. But I will say that these mountains are unbelievable, unbelievable. I said to my husband the other day, all atheists should be required to go to Grand Teton National Park. That will cure you of your atheism pretty quickly because the beauty, the majesty, it also made me realize why the ancient Israelites talked about, my God is my rock and my salvation, whom shall I fear? And they're looking at the mountains in Israel, which didn't even compare to these guys here. We've hiked plenty of these trails now. We haven't peaked anything because we're not mountain climbers, but the Grand Teton Mountain peaks out at 13,775 feet. So it's just unbelievable, unbelievable. And there is a climbers group here, people that actually do ascend to the top. That's not my jam, not anytime soon, I don't think anyway. I prefer to, go places. I can get on the edge of things and I'm good with a little bit of climbing, but just to see it, just to see the majesty of God's creation has just been there's just no words. There's no words for it. So anyway, that's where I am this week in Jackson Hole, which is also very shishi. Like if you want the place where you can go and ski and do the après ski and shop at the finest boutiques, make your way out to Jackson Hole because it is very high end, very upscale, but it's gorgeous. It differs a lot from some of the places we've been, which are like, no red lights in these towns, just small little rancher towns. So it's good to kind of see the contrast. But anyway, if you haven't been out here, put it on your bucket list because just to see something that large coming up out of the earth. It's just been mind blowing to me. Anyway, so this week we're going to be talking about Lady Wisdom, Lady Wisdom. And it's funny, I had a conversation in the laundry room last night with a couple of ladies who um, are Jehovah's Witnesses. And so we were kind of talking about these things, and they had not heard of Lady Wisdom. So I know they sort of altered the Bible, but they knew of the book of Proverbs, but they hadn't heard this. So I thought, well, maybe it is a different concept to think of this, but that is how wisdom is personified in the beginning of Proverbs is Lady Wisdom. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Even though it's not an actual person in the Bible, it is the personification of wisdom is shown as Lady Wisdom, and she's compared and contrasted to Lady Folly or Woman Folly. So the key for wisdom in my research and my thinking about this is what makes a great leader. And so I think that the key to being a great leader is to have a teachable heart. And I think if I asked you to sort of think about who you would consider as a great leader, probably up there on the list of qualifications would be someone that's very teachable, that is willing to adapt and change. That's what makes them a great leader. Now, there are people who would argue that a great leader is somebody who knows everything. And I certainly um, think there's a balance there. You got to have somebody who's highly skilled, highly intelligent, and highly knowledgeable in the area in which they're leading. But if they've dug their heels in and they think they know it all and they have nothing else to learn, I think there's going to be a lid on their leadership. John Maxwell says that your ability to lead is only it's only as big, your capacity is only as big as your capacity to continue to learn. And so leadership isn't just about having followers. It's about being teachable, being coachable, pursuing wisdom. And that is what the book of Proverbs is teaching us, to pursue wisdom. Now, before we dive in here, I want to give you some of that Hebrew language around wisdom. So the Hebrew term is chokmah. Chokmah. And so it's more than just intellectual capacity. And I want to read this definition. It's intelligence and sound judgment in human affairs. So it's having some head knowledge, but being able to be sound in how you judge human affairs, having skill in various arts, and then superior knowledge, in particular for the authors of and I'll come back to authors of the book of Proverbs, as the ancient Hebrews would have used the word chokmah, which is wisdom. It was specifically superior knowledge in religious matters. So that is specifically how they would have seen this, because remember, for this people group, they were the followers of Yahweh, right? So God has rescued them out of slavery in Egypt and has made them into a people. He's promised Abraham that his descendants will be a blessing to all nations, and that would and he would have descendants as numerous as the stars. So for them, their worship of Yahweh, their relationship with God was the core foundation of their identity as a people group. Now, we know, because we've studied a lot of them so far this year, that a lot of them failed absolutely miserably. But when the Hebrews would have talked about wisdom, that's what they were talking about. So it's not just having more knowledge, it's about pursuing wisdom. It becomes a pursuit. And the good thing is, it's a two-way street. The more that we pursue wisdom, the more wisdom we receive. And so that becomes a great gift to us. In fact, Solomon, who's attributed with the writing of much of the book of Proverbs, when he became king after David's death, his father David, God says to Solomon, "What do you want?" And Solomon says, "I want wisdom. Give me wisdom." And so we know Solomon is known as one of the wisest humans that ever lived. So wise leaders actively pursue wisdom. They welcome correction. They welcome this. This is such an important part of growing in wisdom, is being able to welcome that correction in our lives. And then, of course, they continually reshape how they think. I don't know about you, but I've changed my mind about a lot of things over time. I find that in those instances when I've been pursuing wisdom, when I've been able to be corrected, then when I reshape how I think, it's always for the better. It's not just changing my mind for the sake of changing my mind. And it's not changing my mind based on what culture says or what someone else said. I have to go into that with the pursuit of wisdom. All the great coaches that I've had over the years have helped me reshape how I think. But it's because they know I'm pursuing wisdom. That's why I've hired them. They know that I welcome correction, even when it hurts. We'll talk about that. But then that allows me to reshape how I think. That's what wisdom is all about. So it's not about knowing more. It's about becoming more. And so this is what the book of Proverbs is all about. Just to be clear, Proverbs are not promises. They're principles, right? So people will often refer to the book of Proverbs and take, verses out of context and use them as a promise. And I think that's a mistake because you have to understand the context in which it was written. And there are some verses in Proverbs that if you just read them out of context, they might actually be at odds with one another. So you got to be willing to dig a little bit deeper. I did a deep study on Proverbs last year with a Bible study group that I lead in my home. And it was taught by 3 or 4 different instructors. And so what they did was they sort of uh, gathered up, collections of different proverbs and taught what does Proverbs have to say about our relationships, about our work, about our life, about our finances. And so there's great wisdom there if we are intentionally pursuing it. And that's the promise for believers that when you pursue wisdom, the more that you pursue it, the more that you get. And so it's not, these aren't promises. There's one that often gets misused, and it says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, shall not depart from it. And so a lot of people think I raised my child to believe in God and to, go to church or to do the right thing. And then now as an adult, they've veered off the path. Does that mean that God is not honest? That proverb is not honest? And so that's one that comes up for debate a lot in the world, in the church world with parents. And it's like, how do you read into that? The principle is that if you raise your kids right, there's a really good chance that at some point, even if they veer off the path during college or in young adulthood, there's a really good chance that they'll get back on the right track. That's a good principle. It's not a promise, though. It's not a promise because humans have one thing. It's called free will, and so every human's gonna to make that choice for themselves. But just if you can think about it that way as we go through it. So let's set the scene about the book of Proverbs, which is about pursuing chokmah, which is wisdom. Again, not just intellectual capacity. It goes much deeper than that. So wisdom is personified, as I mentioned earlier, as Lady Wisdom, at least in the first, I believe, 9 chapters of the book. But what I want you to think about for our conversation today is what is the mind, what is the thinking behind every great leader? We're talking about great leaders. So John Maxwell says that Proverbs is all about the mind of the leader. So good leaders see things before others see them. We've talked about that in multiple sessions now, that part of leadership is being able to anticipate, right? Tony Robbins will say, leaders anticipate, losers react. And I think I did use the word react in here, and I wish I could have changed it before this all went to print to the word respond. But we'll see how that shows up, because there's a difference between reacting to the circumstances that show up and responding, right? Responding. And so I had my plan all set up. I was telling Kristen before we got started, I had everything set up. I had the computer was facing the right direction. I had made sure there was not going to be a big camper next to me, whatever. And then last night, 3 groups of amazing people pulled up in trucks and RVs that are part of a Make-A-Wish thing for the McDonald family, which I keep looking because they're right there. And there's some kids. They've been filming video of these kids this morning. And so, of course, I'm not disappointed that this family is having an amazing experience of going to 50 states in 50 days in partnership with Camping World, which is, I guess, why they're here. But I didn't react by just saying, well, screw it. I guess I can't do it. It's going to probably be loud, or go inside my dark, ugly camper. I said, what can I do to respond? I've been making those shifts and pivots so that I can still be with you guys. You may not have the greatest view as of now, but we're going to do what we can do. And if a dog starts barking or kids start running around, or a film crew comes up behind us, it's going to be fine. That I think is the difference. So, part of it is anticipating, and part of it is also understanding that sometimes things do show up that you didn't plan for, and how do you respond versus simply react. So that's what good leaders do. Good leaders think beyond what others think. I mean, truthfully, if anybody's going to follow you, hopefully it's because they think you know something they don't know. They think you have the capacity to think beyond what they're thinking. That's why we continually look up. The people are waving as they go by. That's why people are continually looking up to a leader to see, what are you seeing? You're higher up. Speaking of mountain climbing, these trails, my husband and I find that the higher you get up, you keep getting these different vantage points. So when we started a trail yesterday that was about an 1,100-foot ascent, which is a lot, but it was gradually over time. But we would get to one point, it would be like, look at this view, look up at the mountain here, and look down at the lake there, and see what we could see. Then we would get to a different part of the trail, we get a totally different view. The same mountain looking completely different. The closer we got to the top, we could see the glacier without the binoculars, with our naked eye. So that's kind of the thing, right? You want people that are continually a few steps ahead of you, that are seeing things from a different vantage point, so that you can learn what they're seeing. That's what we look for. So think about whatever you do in your business. The reason that people are choosing you as their realtor, their coach, their mortgage lender, their insurance agent is because they hope that you anticipate, you see things they can't possibly see, that you're thinking beyond what they think. You're always a few steps ahead, higher up on the trail than they are. And that's why they're following you. That's why they've chosen you. And then, of course, good leaders plan further than others plan. Like this whole thing, I'm constantly reminded. This whole trip has just been life-changing. My husband said yesterday, it's going to be really hard to go back to normal. And I said, normal is forever different. Like, there's no normal. There is no going back. Like, we have to go home, and we're going to go back to our house and back to our lives. But there's a lot of things that I think we will do differently as a result of this trip. Um, I certainly know we'll plan differently, we'll see differently, we'll think differently, and then maybe some of the activities that we used to think were fun, that maybe they're in our past now, because we're sort of now seeing beyond maybe what others are seeing. And so that's why people are choosing to follow us. So whoever's following you, it's because they think that you are wiser than them in a particular area. And so it's not about personality, it's about perspective. So all the people that we've studied thus far, they either succeeded or failed, or maybe failed then succeeded, or succeeded then failed, right? Because many of the people that we've studied have had their highs and their lows. Um, all of them, from Abraham to Esther, which was our last study. It's it's in the moment, in the action, in the act, in the part of the narrative of humanity that they play. It's their success or failure was based on the way that they thought before they acted. Now, those of us who are believers would know that part of it is anytime we're acting apart from our relationship with our Creator, you know, we can do it because we are all created with free will. But I think you all know that if your partner isn't your creator, you're only going to get so far. And I would say that it's not that you can't fail, even if you're walking in lockstep with God. I'm just saying that from a principle perspective, it's much more likely that your plans will succeed when your plans align with his plans. So my life verse is Proverbs 3:5-6, which is trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Instead, think about him in all your ways and he will make straight your path. So again, that's a great principle. That's a great principle. It's up to me to trust in him. And so I think that's the case with all of the actors in the Bible. So Proverbs is inviting us into the inner world of thinking of how we think. So let's talk, I'm going to read through some of the verses. Proverbs is a long book with a lot of proverbs. There is a great study if you do ever decide to go deeper, because Proverbs, reading it through can kind of get like, okay. I don't know about you, but it sort of becomes like a litany. There's a lot of repetition. There's some that seem to contradict each other. And so it's like reading lineages. in scripture, it becomes a little bit boring. I started the book of Matthew today in my yearly reading plan, and the beginning of Matthew is the genealogy of Jesus, which once upon a time, before I really decided to dive deep and study the Bible, it just felt like a list of names. But now, having read the Bible 4 times, when I read the list of names, some of those names really start to sink in. Like one that really hit me this morning that didn't prior times was Josiah. Why? Because now I've studied Josiah to help teach his story to you. And so it's like, when you read Proverbs, it can feel like I'm just reading this list of do's and don'ts. But Lifeway Women has done an incredible study of the book of Proverbs. It's taught by, like I said, 3 or 4 different teachers, and they do, sort of put them into groups. It's a great study. I highly recommend it. But these are the ones I chose for our purposes today. And all of these are going to come from the English Standard Version. Proverbs 1, verse 5. Let the wise listen to these proverbs and become even wiser, excuse me. Let those with understanding receive guidance. So we don't get wise, we become wiser and wiser, right? And those of us that are willing to listen and understand are going to receive wisdom and guidance. That's just the way it goes. It's a two-way street. It's not a one and done. Proverbs 2, verses 1 through 5. My child. Now, remember, this is written, we believe, from the voice of Solomon to his son. My child, listen to what I say and treasure my commands. Tune your ears to wisdom and concentrate on understanding. Cry out for insight and ask for understanding. Search for them as you would for silver. Seek them like hidden treasures. Then you will understand what it means to fear the Lord, and you will gain knowledge of God. And just for a little tweak there, when we read fear of the Lord, I think probably a better word, or maybe a helpful word to add to that fear, is awe. So the word in Hebrew, fear of the Lord, is kind of like what we would say awe. So when we first drove in from the southern gate of Yellowstone, you kind of go through maybe just 5 miles, and then all of a sudden you're in Grand Teton, and all of a sudden we come around a bend and there are those mountains. There was no words. That was fear of the Lord, because that was awe. That was awe. So that's kind of that. So the idea here again is to think about that. Cry out for insight, right? Search for them as you would for silver. Seek them like hidden treasures. This is what it means. This is how we get to know the will of God and to know God himself. Proverbs 9:9. Instruct the wise, and they will be even wiser. Teach the righteous, and they will learn even more. I think that part of a fulfilling life is to be a lifelong learner, to constantly be open to learn something new. I know that's the way I was wired, so maybe I'm a little bit partial to that, but I do believe that people who are willing to learn, who approach with an open hand, have a different mindset. There's a sociologist, Carol Dweck, and her famous work, is on mindset. And so she, throughout her research, determined that there's 2 types of people, those with an open mindset and those with a fixed mindset. And of course, as she demonstrates, people with an open mindset receive more because they're constantly willing to have things added to them versus people with a fixed mindset. And we all know those people. When I teach classes, a lot of times, or if I go in and do group work with a team, I'll notice my eyes go to the person that's doing this. They're leaned back in their chair and their arms are crossed. They're looking at their watch. They're looking down. That's the person I'm trying to get to, because they've come in with a fixed mindset, maybe because someone made them come to the class or kind of shamed them into coming. But that's the one I want. The person with an open mindset, they're leaned forward. They have all their pens. I always make a joke like they've got colored highlighters and pens and pencils, and they're sort of, it's all laid out. They've got their coffee and their water, and like they're ready to go. They are true explorers. They're ready to receive. They're easy. I don't have to work. It doesn't take a lot of work to engage them. I want to find the guy or gal that has the fixed mindset. But that's what we're talking about here. Instruct the wise, and they will be even wiser. Proverbs 12:1, which we'll talk about in more detail. To learn, you must love discipline. It is stupid to hate correction. And that's correct. I know my mother didn't like me to say that S word, but it is in the Bible, at least as translated. It is stupid to hate correction. We'll talk a little bit more about that one. Proverbs 15:31-33. If you listen to constructive criticism, you will be at home among the wise. If you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding. Fear of the Lord teaches wisdom. Humility precedes honor. Proverbs 17:10. A single rebuke does more for a person of understanding than 100 lashes on the back of a fool. That's a good one. I love that one. If you are someone who's seeking wisdom, who's wanting to grow, and you probably wouldn't be showing up on these calls if you didn't want to grow. And so, one bit of correction, one loving rebuke from someone who cares and wants the best for you, will do more for you than just trying to beat the stupidity out of an idiot. And so sometimes we got to think about this on the leadership side. Where are we putting our energy? Because if you're leading anybody, whether it's your clients and your family or your team, anything in business, you're going to do better to find people that want to grow and focus your attention on them than try to beat submission into the people that have no desire to listen to what you have to say. I mean, that's just a fact. And then Proverbs 27:6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. We'll talk a little bit more about that one as well. So this just sort of as a point of clarification here, even though much of the book of Proverbs is attributed to Solomon, we don't really know exactly who wrote all these down. In fact, there's a lot of the wisdom in the book of Proverbs that can be traced to other sages, even other theological perspectives. So even other ancient traditions, the wisdom is represented there. So certainly Jews and Christians don't hold the monopoly on wisdom. It's just that there's a different connection there. But there's a part of the Bible that says that everyone on earth will be accountable for knowing God because he is present in his creation. And so even the person who lives in such a remote part of the world that they have never heard the gospel or never heard the word God or have been introduced to him, they know him through his creation. I can assure you of that. After what I've seen these last 4 weeks, that's there. But anyway, so other people groups certainly have come into wisdom. So when you look at Proverbs, you've got to think it's a collection of wise sayings that come from Israel's sages across generations, probably Solomon, probably other people groups. And it's all been combined together by whoever wrote it down, whoever God chose to write it all down. So just so you'll know that's why there's a lot of repetition there. So John Maxwell's law of intuition says leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias. That's how you'll know you're growing in your leadership, when you start to think, whether it's your family, your clients, your business, your team, your community, whether you're thinking as a leader. And, selfish point here, part of my goal of doing this series this year is to be able to inspire other people to think like leaders. A lot of my clients are self-employed. I'm self-employed. right? I don't have a team. I have people that do things for me that I've contracted to do that. But they don't work for me. They're not, a W-2 employee under Angie Bell Consulting. And so a lot of my clients are realtors and insurance agents and mortgage lenders, and they're kind of the same thing. We're all self-employed. And some of them, run a team or have a team, but most of us have a job. We own a job. And so, how do we begin to think like leaders? It's not that simple. Most people, in my experience, that end up going into business for themselves do it because they've learned a skill. They have a desire to help. They're good at it, and so they go into business for themselves. And they quickly realize, as Michael Gerber writes in the E Myth and the E Myth Revisited, the E stands for entrepreneur. So he says the entrepreneurial myth. He says most small businesses aren't started by true entrepreneurs. They're started by skilled technicians that have an entrepreneurial seizure. And so to just flesh that out a little bit, it's like, you're the example he uses famously in the E-Myth Revisited is Sarah. Sarah has a job, a 9 to 5. She works for the man. She's tired of doing it. She's really skilled and talented, and she's tired of working for somebody else. So she decides she's going to go into business for herself. What does she do well? Well, she loves to bake pies. She learned it from her aunt. And so she decides to open a pie shop. Great idea until she realizes quickly she doesn't know anything about running a business. She knows how to bake pies, but all of a sudden she has to become a human resources expert, a marketing expert, a financial expert. You get it. The list goes on and on. And so he says that's the case with most small businesses. And I will tell you, when I got into the real estate business a million years ago, it was because I was tired of working for the man. I was tired of working my butt off and getting a 3% annual raise because of budget cuts and all the things. And so I thought I should go into business for myself. And that's what I did. But I very quickly learned that I didn't know a doggone thing about running a business. And that's been my experience. So what's my goal in all of this? It's to help my clients and people like you guys think like leaders. Think like leaders. Whether you ever have a team of people working for you or not, your world changes when you begin to think like a leader. It's the same thing in business as thinking like an owner, not an operator. And so there have been some incredible leaders that have helped me in that. And I want to pass that on to you. To me, then, wrapping this all up in this wisdom that's available to us in scripture, it's the magic formula. And so leaders evaluate everything as a leader. And so thinking like a leader is the first step, right? You won't ever have a follower unless you begin to think like a leader. And so how do you do it? It's not experience. It's about growing in wisdom. It's not instinct. It's wisdom that's accumulated. So we have to be humble, and we have to welcome the experiences that happen to us. And then we have to welcome that correction. That's the hardest part. It's the most fun part to me. Being a coach is not just, the encouragement, which is a big part of it. I tell people I'm your biggest cheerleader, but the most rewarding part of it, Danielle, I know you would agree with this too, is when you can offer someone a correction. Sometimes it's a tiny little tweak, and sometimes it's like a whoa, it's an about face. But when you can begin to offer correction to people and they receive it because they're seeking wisdom, game changer. It's a total game changer. So that's how we become great leaders with great intuition. So the wiser a leader becomes, the better their leadership instincts become. There's probably things that you do today that you don't even think about. You sort of know, you have a knowing, and you're maybe able to advise your own clients on something. And you can't even put a finger on why you were able to offer them this tweak and how they're structuring a deal or the decision that they're making in whatever business you're in. And you don't even realize it. And when they say, and let's say it works out and they say, gosh, thank you so much. And you say stupid things like, hey, no worries, no problem. It's just my job. No big deal. you're really reducing the first of all, you're reducing the ability to get a referral from them because they're recognizing something in you that is helping them reinforce they made the best choice in hiring you. And so when they do that, and you can't even remember, why did you have the instinct? Why did your intuition tell you to tell them to go this way or that way? Stop and drink that in. When they show that appreciation, stop and drink that in and think to yourself, wow, is that because of my humility, my experience, the correction, the way that I've pivoted, the way that I've been seeking wisdom? And then when they show that appreciation, receive it. Receive it and let them know how much it means to you that they've recognized it because you got it through experience, and not just experience, but evaluated experience. And you've made the shifts along the way as you pursued excellence in your career. So if you've got better instincts, it's because you've been pursuing wisdom. Does that make sense? I mean, give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Okay, so let's see what's our leadership lesson number one. Wise leaders think differently, right? Proverbs isn't about what to do and what not to do. It's about how to think, how to think. So the next time you dive into Proverbs, even if you're just open the book and point at one, go a little bit deeper, right? Ask yourself not what is this proverb telling me to do or not do. Ask, what is this proverb inviting me in terms of how I'm thinking about things? So a leader is evaluating what's happening differently than the average bear. We're recognizing patterns. I think we've talked about this before, but I'll repeat it. Tony Robbins talks about patterns in the role of humans. I'll give you some examples. Here in this campground, this is insane to me. This is bear country, okay? I've heard nothing but bear safety, bear this, bear that. I've heard that for a month now. And I have seen two bears. And guess where they were? Right here in humanity, not in the national parks. So you buy the $50 can of bear spray, you take it everywhere you go, and you will never see a bear. There's about 10 million people on all these trails. The bears, I'm sure, are like, I am not going anywhere near those people. But instead, they come into the campgrounds. Why? Because there's dumpsters. And this particular campground, when we got here, had regular dumpsters. Everything else, every garbage can in every national park and anywhere I've been has these bear-proof things that you got to lift this way and twist that way and push and get it open so the bears can't get into it. Well, the first day we got here, the dumpster was completely turned over. There's garbage everywhere. The second day, all the campers were told to stay in their camper because the bear was wandering around the campsite with the garbage bag. My husband saw the bear holding a garbage bag. So, bears know the pattern. I go to this particular place. I can get in this dumpster. I can get this garbage. I don't know what they do with it all. I guess they lick out the inside of the cans. I don't really know. But even bears can recognize patterns. Pattern recognition is just a normal part of most creatures. I could give many examples of the animals that we've seen, even the way the plants are growing, all the things. Pattern recognition is an important part of life itself. But what's different about humans? Humans begin to utilize patterns, right? Agriculture exists because of our ability to utilize the patterns of the seasons of planting and reaping. And then when you get really good, you create your own patterns. So when you study the book of Proverbs as a way of thinking, not as a do and don't list, you can start to evaluate things differently and not only recognize patterns, but begin to create your own patterns. That's the difference. That's the difference. And I think if it's making me want to go back and reread the entire book again and just think about it as how can I utilize this information not only to grow in wisdom and my relationship with God, but to become better at what I do as a leader in my business, in my life, in my community, in my church, right? How can I begin to create patterns and anticipate the consequences? That's really what we're talking about here. John Maxwell always says this: leaders know the way, go the way, and show the way. So again, whether you're leading your clients or in your family or in any other capacity, that's why people are following you, because they believe that you've anticipated what's ahead. And then they know that you're willing to go the way. You've done the work. And then, of course, now you show them the way. And then that cycle begins to repeat. As they become better leaders, they know the way, they go the way, and they show the way. So if you want to grow a team, by the way, that's a great way to think about it. It's 3 simple steps. So healthy organizations are led by leaders who intentionally improve, right? We're not talking about reacting to what happens in the market, in the industry, in your company, whatever it is. We're talking about how do we process problems. So I'm going to ask you for a moment to just think, where are you potentially reacting instead of thinking, instead of anticipating? Is there any area of your business or your life where you're in reaction mode? And if there is, this is time to slow down and do some thinking before you take your next action step. And so then my second question is, when's the last time you took time to anticipate what's down the road or around the corner, even better? This could be changes in your team itself, right? Are there life changes happening in your team that you need to be aware of and prepare for? What's going on in your industry? What's down the road? What's around the corner? What about your community? What about the economy? What about your own goals or your career? Right? We're all going to be in different places. At almost 62 years old, I'm in a different place than some of my clients that are in their 30s and 40s. And so when I'm projecting into my future, it looks different than for them. So it's important to take time periodically to sort of sit back and anticipate what's going on. The more you do it, the better you get at it. That's just a fact. All right, leadership lesson 2. Wisdom must be pursued. So you'll see throughout the book of Proverbs really strong action words: receive, treasure, incline, call out, seek, search. These are the kind of words that you'll see repeated over and over again. So you don't just accidentally wake up and you're wiser. John Maxwell says that experience isn't the best teacher, but evaluated experience is a fantastic teacher. So this isn't about passively receiving something. It's about intentionally pursuing it. And so leadership development is an intentional pursuit. It's not a passive experience. Some things you're going to grow from, right? Hopefully you're still not touching a hot stove, but that's not what we're talking about. That's a survival mechanism. That's a survival instinct to learn from those kinds of patterns. But that's very different. Maybe you have had this experience. I know I have, that I've made the same mistake multiple times. And you wonder, how does that happen? How do we make the same mistake over and over and over again? And I think for me, it was before I really engaged in the work. I started in earnest in about 2011 when I became a coach, which was, if I'm going to coach others, I got to get really good at learning. I've always been sort of addicted to learning things, but now I wanted it to be praxis, which is when you bring wisdom and action together to something that actually works. There's a lot of people I've seen online that will give you a lot of coaching. I'm using air quotes if you're listening, a lot of coaching or a lot of instruction around how to X, Y, or Z, and they've never done it. And they've never even done anything like it. They've bought some program and they think now that gives them the ability to try to sell you that same program. That is not what I'm talking about. Praxis is when you learn something and then you do something, but you got to put it all together. That's the intentional pursuit of wisdom. So the moment you believe you've arrived, you're done for. You're done for. I believe, if I remember this from years and years ago, we use the word sophomore to describe 10th grade, right? Or the second year of college. You're a freshman, then you're a sophomore. But if I understand this, if I remember this correctly, in the Greek, sophomore is about, it really is about the moment when you become consciously incompetent, meaning you now know there's a lot you don't know, right? And I would much rather be consciously incompetent than unconsciously incompetent and think I know what there is to know, right? It was like learning to drive a car. At 16, I thought you got in and you did this and you just went down the road. Well, I don't know if you know about that now, but if you drove like this, you're gonna get pulled over or you're gonna cause an accident. But it's about understanding. I'm never gonna get there. I'm never gonna get there. So I'm sorry, what are you intentionally learning right now? I mean, well, right now, I guess you could say, well, I'm intentionally learning about wisdom, which is awesome. But, outside of our time together, like, what are you intentionally investing in right now so that you're learning and growing? And who are you listening to, reading, or watching? Who? It's really important that we're not listening to, reading, or watching people that aren't invested in growth. And hopefully, if it's somebody personal, they're invested in your growth. It's really important. There's a lot of voices out there, a lot of voices. And somebody told me this morning, I spoke with a team member of a team that I coach, and they said they love to doom scroll. Now, this person isn't specifically my client, but they were talking to it in reference to how to improve the social media of this particular team. And I thought, let's hope doom scrolling isn't a part of it. But, if that's how you're spending your time, you know, the word doom is probably anyway not the thing you want to be doing. So who are you listening to, reading, or watching? So just a note on Lady Wisdom, since we're talking about the heart of a teachable leader, is that Lady Wisdom is pursued, is personified as this godly woman. She's calling out to anyone willing to listen. She's at the crossroads, the city gates, the places where she's everywhere. And she reminds us that wisdom is available, but it has to be intentionally pursued. But let's talk about Lady Folly or Woman Folly. She's also out in the public, and she's crying out for anyone willing to listen. She's doing the same thing. Unfortunately, though, the people, and you can go in and read this in those first 9 chapters, unfortunately, what she's calling people to is their own destruction, right? What she wants to do is destroy you. What Lady Wisdom wants to do is uplift you and lead you to that eternal life. So right now, I don't use Facebook or Instagram. I'm not a social media person, but I hear enough of it from other people that I know that both of those voices are out there. Some people are using social media to broadcast the message of wisdom. And some people are using it to broadcast the message of folly. So, they're both going to be out there crying out loud. Who are you going to listen to, for crying out loud? So for a leader, it's simple. You're always listening to a voice. But wisdom is about choosing the voice that helps you build something that's actually worth leading. So that's just an invitation to sort of think about where are you spending your time? Who are you listening to? Is it Lady Wisdom, or is it Lady or Woman Folly? So leadership lesson number 3, speed up here. Wise leaders love correction. Love correction. This was that 12:1 I read earlier. Whoever loves discipline, and don't think of it as discipline like I'm disciplined. I get up every day at 6 o'clock, and it's not that kind of self-discipline. It's discipline as we know it, right? Spare the rod, spoil the child. It's that level of discipline. It's correction. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. So it's harsh, but I think it's understanding that the foolish person is not just someone who doesn't know. It's someone who refuses to know, who refuses to listen, who refuses to change their ways. If you've had children, there is a part of their life we call the terrible twos, or what's the new one they're calling the threes? Because the twos were nothing for my grandkids. It was the threes, the tyrannical threes or the terrorist threes. I don't know what they call it, but it's 3 is the one. The 3-year-old refuses correction. They're a fool, but they're 3. right? At some point, if your kids don't start listening and you can't explain to them the why, right? Not that you won't ever say because I said so. I swore I'd never say that as a parent. I said it a million times. But if we can't as parents begin to discipline our children and help them to understand, they won't get to the point where they welcome our correction, right? So if we're adults and we're still refusing correction, here's your sign. Because the wise leader realizes that feedback is one of their greatest gifts, because every correction is an opportunity to better, become better. And I think that's the point of it. If you are not willing to have someone speak truth into you, even when it's painful, according to scripture, that's just stupid. That's stupid. So that's, you'll see that in the book of Proverbs. The wise leader does this, or the wise person does this and the foolish person does that. So as you read through Proverbs, you'll notice that. The two verses that I love, one says that that if you correct a fool, you just become like the fool. But the other one says that correct a fool or you'll become one. So the let's see, did I say that right? So the one says that that some people, you're wasting your breath. You're wasting your breath with them, and the more that you try to argue with them, the dumber you become. But the other one says that if you don't correct a fool, he becomes even more foolish. So what is wisdom? Well, it's discerning who is the person that isn't actually open to growth. They just want to argue. You're wasting your breath with that person. The other one is the person who just doesn't know. They want to know. And so therefore you want to offer them that correction, right? That's the difference. It's like there are certain areas where, I don't know about you, if you've ever been married, but I've tried to coach my husband multiple times before I understood that he doesn't want me to coach him. So it doesn't do me any good. I do it in my head, but I don't say it out loud. Instead, I'm going to focus my energy on people say, can you help me get better, even if it means correcting me? So that's kind of the difference there. So we're talking about leaders who welcome instruction versus those who reject it. So if we want to get better, we got to be willing to be coached. So healthy leaders don't just surround themselves with people who agree with them. We've talked about that on other sessions as well. Um, we need people who are willing to tell us the truth, always, radically, right? I think that is super important. Um, the other one that I read from 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy. And so a real friend, whether it's a coach, a mentor, or really just a real friend, they're going to tell us something that we may not want to hear specifically because they care about who we're becoming. So even though it stings in the moment, the purpose is growth. They're not trying to harm us. And so we have to be discerning as leaders. Who are the people that are genuinely interested in us, who are generally invested in our growth? Not just fan people. I have a client, and this person's growing a team, and I said, unfortunately, because of her personality and her persona, a lot of people just want to be in her aura. They're not necessarily there because they want to grow or they want to help her grow. They're fangirls. And honestly, we don't have time for that. Like, let your bestie be your fangirl or fanboy. Somebody who's just, blow smoke up your skirt and just tells you how awesome you are. That's perfect. You probably need one person like that, but they're not the people that are going to coach you and mentor you into growing as a human being and as a business owner. So you want to be the person who values the wounds of a faithful friend more than just the kisses of a flattering, fool, because they're not going to help you. So the question is, how do you honestly respond when someone tells you that you're wrong? That's something to think about. And who in your life loves and cares enough about you to tell you the truth, even when it hurts? If you don't have those people, you need to get them. And when you think about the correction that you do receive, or when it's been pointed out to you that you're maybe thinking or acting contrary to what's best for you, or you're just flat out wrong, how do you respond to that? Something to think about. Because if you respond defensively, maybe you're not pursuing wisdom. And that's the goal here. All right. And lastly, leadership lesson 4, wisdom produces discernment. So again, it's not about information, it's about discernment. And wise leaders recognize, they know the difference between what's good and what's bad, what's healthy and unhealthy, right? They do that before everyone else does. That's why wise leaders protect people. They're always thinking ahead. They're always thinking beyond. And so ultimately what we want is moral discernment, right? This is not just accumulating knowledge. It's walking steadily on the right path. So that's why leaders tend to make more money, by the way, because they're discerning. They're noticing what other people miss. They're looking around the corners. They have good, solid judgment. So people come to them, they rise to higher levels in whatever it is that they do, and they tend to be rewarded. The marketplace rewards wise people who are willing to lead. So where do you need to practice greater discernment before making your next big decision? There's not a week that goes by that I don't have a client say, I'm getting out of this business. I'm done. And so it's like, okay, but because they're wise and they're seeking and pursuing wisdom, we can talk that through before they make a decision that they may actually regret. So I don't know, if you're not ready to get out of your business every now and again, you're probably not working that hard. So there's the wisdom cycle. You receive it, right? You got to listen first. You pursue it. You never stop learning. You accept that correction, right? And then you discern, and then you lead. So that's a great way to think about the wisdom cycle. That's what I see in the book of Proverbs. So last few questions here, because we're running out of time. Where have you mistaken experience for wisdom? Those bears that know when a bear in this part of the country gets too comfortable around humans, you know what they do with the bear? They kill it. They kill it. Because when a bear gets too comfortable with humans, it gets too comfortable with humans. Humans get too comfortable with bears. Bad things happen. Bears are not, they are not wise. So the bears have had plenty of experiences. And if they were wise, they'd look around and go, hey, where's all the other bears? Oh, they've been killed because they were hanging out at the dumpsters. Now, by the way, yesterday, brand new dumpsters in this campground that are bear proof. I don't know if somebody must have blown a whistle on these cats. But anyway, where are you mistaking experience for wisdom? Because they're two different things. And do the people closest to you feel safe correcting you? And who has permission to challenge you? And when was the last time you changed your mind because someone else was right about something? I think this is about the humility that we started with today. This is about becoming a better leader and being more humble. So here's your homework. Think about 3 people that you really trust and ask them this week, what's one thing you believe I'm blind to? It could be in your business, could be in your family, could be in your community, whatever. Like, ask them, do you see a blind spot in me? Right? What is it? This has to be somebody you trust who's willing to be honest with you. It's just listening to them and then deciding, what am I going to do with that knowledge? We all have blind spots. And so continuing to have those blind spots reflected to us and made visible to us, it's going to help us. We're going to go a long way. So I'm going to challenge you to do that this week. Ask 2 to 3 people, like, what's my blind spot? And then decide what to do about it. So the greatest threat to leadership isn't ignorance. It's the belief that you no longer need to learn. There's a lot of things you and I don't know. I mean, the list of things I don't know, way longer than the list of things I do know. And I'm a learning-based person, but there's mountains of books out there I haven't read, mountains of thought leaders I haven't heard. So it's not about what I don't know. It's if I get to the point where I'm like, I know everything that there is to know, that's when we're in trouble. That's when you and I are in trouble. Teachability is the foundation of everything in terms of leadership. And I think you would probably agree with that. So hopefully this has been inspiring and challenging. I hope that this week you'll go out and seek Chokmah, because it's wisdom. And remember, it's not just intelligence, though it includes intelligence. It's sound judgment in human affairs. It's skills in various things, and it's superior knowledge, in particular as it pertains to your relationship with God. So I hope that you'll think on these things this week. Let me know how it goes. Let me see. I'm gonna get these things because I couldn't do it, and then I'm gonna let you guys go. Challenges of Proverbs. Yeah, dig deeper. Proverbs can get boring because it just feels like you're reading the same things over and over again. Um, and yeah, the entrepreneurial seizure. Go read Michael Gerber if you haven't. He's great. And if I can only tame my tongue. Amen. I got one of those too. And it tends to take on a mind of its own. So awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed today, and I will see you on our next session.